Hello, fancy seeing you here. Welcome back to Babblings. Insert the cool theme song that I'm getting soon. Yeah. If you were watching on video, you just got some really good dance moves. You're welcome. Welcome back to Babblings. I don't really know what episode this is. I guess maybe 2.5, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But no, it's been a minute again. Every time I go on, it's like, oh shit, I had a plan and I started it and then I didn't stick to it. But that's okay. I took kind of February off, but I still posted writings. If you haven't already, please go over and check out my Substack, babblings.substack.com. Or is it substack.babblings.com? No, it's babblings.substack.com. It's basically like my website. It's where I put up all of my little articles, some personal journal entries. It's also where the host of the podcast is, so you can watch the podcast over there, listen to the podcast over there. It's also where you can get the Babblings report, which is the newsletter that goes with the podcast episode. That's always going to be over on my Substack, and all of that is linked below. Make sure to check out this episode's Babblings report for all of the references that I mention, articles that I mention, resources that I mention, anything. You can always find it down below in the Babblings report. Self-promo aside, how are you? How is everyone? I hope you're doing good. I think we're all doing okay. And the world is just kind of weird right now. And my life is kind of weird right now. I'm gnawing on the bars of my enclosure, banging, get me out, get me out of this jail that is Pisces season, get me into Aries season. I need to shine. I'm ready for spring. I have, for as long as I have been like, no, I'm loving winter. I'm wintering. When everyone's complaining, and I'm like, no, winter, yes. I'm over it. I'm over dreaming. I'm over what is it called when animals go away? I'm over hibernating. I'm over being like, what do I think? What do I love? What do I dream? What could be? I'm ready for things to start happening. And that's on all of my Aries placements. But also just because, I feel like as I started to pay more attention to myself and to the patterns of the world, that I just really come to life in the springtime and in Aries season. It's really the real start of the new year, and when I feel like things really can start to kick off. And I'm in a bit of a limbo space in my life right now. I know that something new or different may unfold, but I just don't know what it looks like. And I've been in this kind of limbo space before, which is, why it's okay. And I'm comfortable in the uncomfortableness. I can deal with it because I've done it before. And what I needed to happen happened, and the universe will provide a path forward for me. I truthfully believe that, and that's on manifestation or prayer or meditation or energy work, whatever you want to call it, magic. Especially on the day that this is coming out on Friday, we're going to be in the midst of the lunar full moon eclipse on the 14th of March. I think that's what Friday is. And it's going to be in Virgo. And we're in the kind of Virgo Pisces axis with the eclipses right now. And which is also funny because my South Node is in Pisces and my North Node is in Virgo, and I'm also a Virgo moon. I'm really resonating and feeling those themes of having dreams and having goals and having ideas of what things could be, and now trying to find that discipline and meticulousness within Virgo in order to help achieve it without becoming so self-critical, and releasing that criticism of myself and that shame in order to really push forward and manifest new opportunities in my life. And not just because of my placements is that happening. I feel like that is a lot of lessons that we can all be working on right now. This eclipse in Virgo, I think, is just really about learning to not be hard on yourself and let go of those negative thought patterns, and learn how to find, at least especially for me, discipline without shame, or or without perfectionism being really the goal. Discipline just, to create what is meant to be created. I don't know if any of that made sense, but I hope so. Along with that, also the Venus retrograde and just this time of year, I think has really had me reflecting, and I've been in different situations that have really brought to the surface feelings of just being chronically misunderstood. I feel that a lot of my life I've been misunderstood, and that's fine. And I think I'm not alone in that. I think a lot of people feel misunderstood. I think it's hard for me because I feel misunderstood, yet I understand other people so well. And it's hard to operate in that world where it's like, what do you think about me? Do you really not know me? Can you really not see to my core, who I am and what I believe? And I don't know, and maybe people can, and maybe that's a fear of mine, a fear of being misunderstood. My word of the year is joy, and I am a very joyful person, and I am a very kind and loving person, and I think sometimes my just genuineness comes off as maybe naivety or childlikeness. I guess that is true. I am very childlike. I have a very joyful childlike spirit, and that might be part of it too. But I have such layers to me, and I've been through a lot in my life, and my life has not felt settled really ever. I'm constantly uncovering new things about myself. I'm constantly doing work and self-reflection and criticizing, and I'm constantly evolving and putting myself to task to confront things within myself. And everybody's not doing that, I guess. I thought, everybody was. And this is as I'm getting older and meeting people and engaging, and people are meeting me for the first time and don't know my life and don't know me, and I do just come off as a bubbly and fun, quirky kind of person, and I am, that is part of me, but there are more parts to me, but people don't really consider that there might be. I think sometimes people don't consider that there might be more depth to me, and so maybe just write me off, which is fine. And some of that is a bit of a defense mechanism on my part to be kind of funny and bubbly, and I don't know. I'm babbling now. It's okay to be misunderstood. I know myself, and that's also part of it too. I feel I see sometimes people really trying to prove who they are, and I'm not gonna prove who I am to anyone. You're gonna see it as you know me through my actions, through my words, through my thoughts, through how I think and how I express myself. I think sometimes we all just have a deep want to be seen for who we are completely, and wanting to connect in that way. But in this world that has been built up for us to come into, and that we're living and operating within, is so far away from connection. I think we have a hard time acknowledging and realizing what connection is in the moment, and trying to build upon that, because we're used to being in our phones, or instant gratification, or I don't know, I just feel the art of getting to know someone has been lost. And I think I also have a hard time because I operate in a place where I hold space for everyone to have multitudes. If I can be as complex as I am, that means that everyone else on the planet, everyone else that I know, also has that capability of being that complex. Whether they are or not, I don't know, but they have that capability to be. You have to know in some sort of way you're not special, and just as you can feel so many things at one time and have a multitude of opinions and differ in different situations, like so can other people. I think it's also a bit of like a humbleness maybe that I have. I don't assume ever that I'm better or different than anyone in any capacity. Now I get to know you after a while, I'd be like, okay, well, you know, there's maybe, a little bit, there's maybe not a lot going on. Or maybe there is a lot going on. I don't know, but like that's part of like getting to know someone and asking people questions. I feel like we've lost the art of like being curious and being open to people being multifaceted and not pinning people in like little boxes and they have to act that certain way or like categorizing people. I don't know. I'm just babbling now, but just to say there's a lot of reflection happening going on over here. These eclipses and these retrogrades are all leading up and preparing for not only my birthday in May, but my Saturn return when Saturn returns to Aries. So, there's just a lot. There's a lot going on over here. So stay tuned. Stay tuned because I have a feeling April's about to go crazy. I don't know what's going to happen in April, but like it's going to be the start of a crazy new chapter. And maybe it could be for you too. Why don't we pull a card and find out? I already like pre-shuffled these and set some intentions and just want to find, a message for the collective, for all of us that we could hear right now. What do we need to hear in order to serve us into our highest and best good? And especially since you will be listening to this on the day of the lunar eclipse in Virgo. It's also a red moon, which is fun. What do you need to hear right now in order to facilitate and manifest? Well, we're not really manifesting, but in order to facilitate movement forward in your life. Let's see. I usually only like to get one card out for these, but these three popped out and they were the first. Ooh. Hold on, I gotta show some shoulder. There we go. But these three came out. So, I don't know, and they're just kind of resonating with me. Four of Swords, which really landed on the ground in reverse. Page of Wands, and the Four of Wands, which is interesting. I've been seeing 414 a lot. 414, 818, 777, 444, 222, 333, 616. If any of those numbers resonate with you. But that's just reminded me of 414. And especially with the Four of Swords coming out in reverse, to me, and with the Page of Wands, and I think this really honestly correlates with exactly what I was just talking about. This feeling that I have of a readiness to burst forth into this new chapter, to come out of this Four of Swords energy, to come out of this rest and reflection and dreaming state, this in my head state, which I feel like I've really been in with this Q1 with Aquarius and Pisces season, and to head forth and to start on this new journey. It's time for us to, with this Page of Wands, venture out into something that we're passionate about. Going after something that we're passionate about, going after someone we're passionate about, especially with the Four of Wands, going after something, a job, a creative idea, especially with a wand energy, travel, a new adventure, and in this new chapter. And the Page of Wands is that spark and that childlike energy also coming back, which is interestingly enough, but it's grabbing that staff and readying itself to move forward. And with the Four of Wands, this is maybe a new vision, a new passion, a new idea. Like I said, it could be a relationship with the Four of Wands, like a real commitment, but also like family and home and foundation. I'm hearing like foundation, so like maybe a new foundation. I need to pull more cards. Hold on. So I feel like those three first cards that I pulled were kind of more of like an energy check and like confirming like that's kind of like what's going on, the themes of what's going on. But I didn't feel like it really gave advice or really what to do about it. It just kind of said this is what's happening. But it's like, okay, and sometimes with tarot I'm like, okay, yes, And what else? Tell me more. But the Queen of Swords came out when I was kind of just thinking and focusing on the idea of okay, but and what do we do about it? What does the collective need to do? And the Queen of Swords came out. And I feel like she's come out with for us before. This is funny. This is the first tarot deck that I ever bought, and really the one that I learned with, which is a decision to learn tarot without the traditional images, because the traditional images are what they are for a reason and hold like symbolism that goes back for centuries that our collective unconscious like recognizes and is able to interpret. And so it's easier to learn with a traditional deck, I think. If you're big into imagery. So funny that I learned without this one, but this one I loved because it had butterflies. So many butterflies. And she is looking directly forward, because she sees the path. She's calculated in her head exactly what she needs to do. Virgo is an air sign. Virgo is an earth sign, and Queen of Swords is an air sign. Virgo and Gemini are an earth and an air sign, and they both share Mercury as their ruling planet. And so there is a lot of mental stimulation happening with Virgo. And so there's a lot of planning and details and forecasts. So we need to be in this position, but we also need to, with on the bottom, the Nine of Swords, it came out reverse. We need to let go, though, of the anxiety. We need to move forward and let what's going to happen manifest. The Queen of Swords can be controlling, or she could be harsh, but she can also be very intuitive. And in traditional imagery, she's pointing forward through the clouds, which always speaks to me that she sees the way through the cloudiness, or she knows there's a path forward, and she knows where to step, where to put her feet next. Even though she can't see the bigger picture, she can continue to take steps forward and trust that her feet are going to land. Somebody, and maybe it was me too, or just me, needed to hear that they need to let go of anxiety and of worry and of fear, and just go and just do. And you have the plan, you have the solution, you have the faculties, you have the strengths, you have the lessons that you've learned, you have the intuition. You just have to keep moving forward. You have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. You cannot see the big picture. The big picture has not come into view yet, but trust that every time you put your foot down, follow that gut feeling, follow your intuition, and know that you're going to land on the right rock forward. Especially if that has to do with a job or a home or a career. But also, if this is more about like relationships, because I keep going back to the Four of Wands, which, could be. So this is about maybe a lover or a friendship or a family member. This could be talking about themes of like needing to be less serious, and more playful, and about following like, your passion. So maybe that's not familial. Maybe that's not friendly or familial. Maybe that's just like a lover, but I don't know. If it resonates, it resonates. God bless. I outlined this episode so long ago that the current events aren't really current events anymore. And also, it's a hard world right now. But I do want to just go over or just share or download about, the things that I am paying closer attention to. One is just things going on locally in DC right now. We are in a precarious place as a district of the United States and not as a state. I've spoken about this previously, but not having representation and really any protection against like the federal government really imposing in on us, it's putting people in quite a precarious situation. I'm not just talking about layoffs of like the federal workers, but also threats to DC. DC has been threatened with funding being taken away, funding for housing and education, and, food assistance, like all of these things are being targeted, I think, in an effort to really weaken the city and ultimately force people out that the government doesn't want to be here. And that's not any new news. Yeah, that's nothing new, but it is starting to happen at a bit of what I would consider an alarming rate. And what I've been saying I was worried about is coming to fruition. So I'm just keeping a close eye on that. Mayor Bowser, as anyone would have assumed, is not standing ground on really anything that she said, and really is just a pawn in the federal government's game. And unfortunately, the citizens of the District of Columbia have no say in what happens to them and where their tax dollars go. So that's not really fair. It's not really a good fucking look. Another thing that I'm paying attention to is all of the anti-trans legislation that is being put out. There is so much harmful rhetoric going on right now. Why people can't leave trans people alone, I will never understand. I don't understand why it's anybody's business what somebody does with their body or how they identify. Just because you haven't had that experience or can't understand that experience doesn't mean that that's somebody's experience. And that's across the board in all of life. It's no different here. But, I think it is, honestly, I think that for the people that are really in charge, and the real bad people, overlords, I don't think they really care. I think that they're just using it as a way to rally homophobic people and to make people scared, fear mongering. Because in reality, this is not an issue. Trans people are not an issue. We're talking about 1% of the population not identifying with the gender that they were assigned at birth. What's wrong with that? It's not harming anyone. No one is being converted and no one is being indoctrinated into I don't know, this weird behavior, except for homophobic people and conservatives are being indoctrinated into this weird cult where they think trans people are harming children. That's just not happening. It's just not happening. Linked in the Bowlings report is going to be the trans legislation tracker. It's just a nice hub if this is something that you're concerned with and want to be following, which I do think it is, because this is just the beginning. Censoring of any group is a threat to all of us. Right now, there are 738 bills in 49 states that are anti-trans bills. 22 of them have passed. 677 of them are active. 39 have failed. So these are bills that are seeking to reduce trans people's right to healthcare and access to medication they may need, education. We're talking, this also goes into all the DEI stuff, and even just recognition. A couple weeks ago, Hunter Schafer made a video. She's a very popular model and actor who is a trans woman, and she had to get her passport renewed and within the last month, and it got reissued to her with her being identified as male when previously she was able to have a passport identifying her as female. And this is just the beginning of what this legislation is aiming to do, and this rhetoric, this fear mongering is aiming to do, is to take away trans people's right to express themselves how they are. And it's really a means of control. It's ultimately a means of population control, shutting down any type of differentiation between people, shutting it down any type of self-expression. Along with that, all of this harmful rhetoric creates so much violence. Trans people, trans women, Black trans women are faced with incredible violence, and it's awful. And all of the rhetoric coming from, the officials of the government, and then putting out, what did they put out? Trump put out, defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government, his executive order. Putting all of those things out makes people feel more emboldened to do harmful acts to trans people, and it also really, really affects the mental health of trans people and trans youth. How can you feel like you can go through the world if your government hates you? Since 2013, 372 trans and gender expansive people have lost their lives to fatal violence. 36 trans and gender expansive people have lost their lives to fatal violence in the last 12 months. 84% of trans and gender expansive victims of fatal violence are people of color. 83% were transgender women, and 61% were Black trans women. In like January, or maybe it was February, an 11-year-old in Texas died by suicide after being bullied by her classmates, telling her that she was going to be deported, and she wasn't, but like them threatening to call ICE on her and her family. An 11-year-old and other 11-year-olds were doing that. And the same thing happens to queer people all across the country, and it trickles into the youth. She died by suicide. She thought that was her solution to get out of here, and that is what the harmful rhetoric is doing. I've identified some places that you could donate to, get involved with, volunteer. Definitely you want to try and find places local to you. Giving money to them or giving time to them is going to be more of a instant or more of an immediate impact on people. It's going to get to people sooner. You can Google, but I always say Reddit for that kind of stuff, to find foundations and to hear people's thoughts. And that's always a good place to start. The Human Rights Campaign Foundation has a report called The Epidemic of Violence Against Transgender and Gender Expansive Community in the U.S. I'm going to link that for you below. It came out in 2024. It also has a nice in memoriam where it highlights some trans people that have lost their lives to violence in 2024. I think it's important to know people's stories. It's important to speak up and say something if you see somebody being harassed or are potentially in danger. I think it's important also just to be a kind person and to accept people for who they are and who they have found themselves to be in this life, and what someone else does has nothing to do with you. At the end of the day, trans people are not a threat to society. Society currently is a threat, though, to trans people, and people are losing their lives just trying to be themselves. So let me have a sip of my drink. So we're gonna get a little real in this episode. We're gonna get a little candid. We're gonna get honest. We're gonna get dirty. We're gonna get into the weeds of this shit, okay? And we're talking about sex. Welcome to the sex episode. Eventually, I would love to be able to have people send me voice memos asking for advice, especially sex advice. I'd love to give you guys advice. Anyways, so me, I bet you didn't know this about me, but I have been basically celibate for 2 years. Not basically, I have. And celibate's really the only word I know to use. Maybe there's a different word, a word that would be better. Abstained, maybe. And for, a couple of reasons that I've already talked about on this podcast. I think I even told the whole story that was the catalyst when I realized I need to not just be flip-flopping all around town, and I need to be a little bit more intentional about where I'm popping the. But before that, I was honestly a very a pretty scandalous, promiscuous, little lady. I have been, and I have been for a while. So sometimes this will come up because it's not a secret. It's not a shame thing. It's not a weird thing to me. I don't care. And it's something to talk about. So sometimes it'll come up, and whenever it comes up, there's always one or two people, that are there that I'm talking to this about. And they're usually people that don't really know me, and I'm just chit chatting here about my sex life, like a lunatic. But I could honestly care less if people know this about me. But they're always oh my God, what? Are you serious? How do you live? Oh my God, I can't believe it. Girl, how do you make it through the day? How do I make it through the day? Just because I'm not fucking anybody, first of all, does not mean that I'm not rocking my own shit, okay? I'm on multiple times a day, girl. Okay? When I said we're getting candid, we're getting candid. Okay? I'm having the best orgasms I've ever had in my life. And that's ultimately why I abstain, because why do I keep hooking up with these dusty, crusty, musty people who are not rocking my socks off, aren't even getting me close to getting there, don't even want to put in the effort to try to get there. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the craziest and most intense orgasms I've ever had in my life I gave to myself. I'm just gonna be honest right now. And sometimes, like, not even with toys. Like, yeah. Like, I get down. Okay. So, like, don't worry about me. Like, I'm doing good. Like, are you doing good? Because then I'll be like, yeah. Because I'm like, oh man, I can't blah, blah, blah. Like, I have to have it. And I'm like, damn, yeah, I guess that sex must be so good. And you're orgasming, like, you're coming good. And they'll be like, oh, well, exactly. Which made me beg the question, are y'all not orgasmic? Now, listen, this is honestly going to be a pretty straight heterosexual conversation, to be honest. This is mostly about, like, women who sleep with men, because there is an orgasm gap and we're going to get into it, but it is not the same reflective when you're looking at relationships where there are two women in a relationship together or two men in a relationship together, or non-binary. There, in the spectrum of queerness, there is not the same orgasm gap, which has to do with a lot of things, which we'll get into. And I also don't want to come across as shaming anyone or invalidating anyone's experience, because I know there are a lot of reasons why someone might not be able to climax. Body dysmorphia, gender dysphoria, trauma, depression, anxiety, all hosts of mental health disorders, being on certain medications, being tired, exhaustion, stress. There are so many reasons why you may, one, not be in the mood, or two, have trouble climaxing by yourself or with a partner. But let's put those things aside, because those things, I'll just tell you, you got to go to therapy to work through. So you're going to need a mental health professional, and I'm not one. And I have been there. I struggle with disassociating during sex because of trauma that I have. And so I'm really not shaming anyone or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, I understand there may be other reasons, like, besides some of the things I'm going to talk about today, why you may not be able to climax. And that could be for somebody who's non-binary, somebody who's trans, somebody who's bi, gay, straight, pan, anything, And about the asexuals, I don't know. I don't really know a lot about the asexuals. That's something I need to learn more about the asexuals. I will say that. Hold on, let me get some more of my drink. We're drinking tequila and water and strawberry watermelon flavored drops. And this is something, like, data that I've been collecting for years. I feel like ever since my breakup, and I was been starting talking more candidly about my own sex life and talking more candidly with people about their sex life. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm with someone, blah, blah, blah. And it's, and I'm like, oh, so the sex is good? Yeah. And, like, you're orgasming? Well, it's not really. There's so many women that I know that are having sex with men and are not coming, are not orgasming. And I know a handful of people that think that they're maybe the problem, or that it's just difficult for them. Talking about sex organs, right? Like, having a clitoris and a vagina, a vaginal canal, like, those, that is different than having, like, a penis. So, like, different things are going to have to happen differently, but a clitoris is just as sensitive and has, I think, just as many nerve endings as, like, the whole of, like, someone's tip. I'm sorry. This is getting so... This is getting really... This is getting to be a lot, but somebody needs to fucking talk about this, okay? Somebody needs to talk about this. Now, as someone who discovered pleasure in their sexual organs at a pretty early age, I will be, I have been doing this for a while. And, I've been a bit promiscuous for a while and had some definitely attention seeking ways where, I definitely found self-worth in what I could offer people sexually. But we've worked on that, and that's a conversation maybe for another day. But that coincides with me also, though, too, being like finding pleasure pretty young and liking it and enjoying it and continuously like, getting better and better at figuring out, what that meant for me. And then, figuring that out with other people. Because, I was talking to my siblings after I broke up with someone a couple years ago, and I was dating other people and like hooking up with people and kind of for the first time, other people for the first time in a while. And I was telling them like, I realized like, one, I did have it good. I wouldn't say like, in the relationship that I've been in, it was bad, but, because, like I would, or like, this is so much. The thing is like, who's listening to this and who's watching this? Okay, anyways. I kind of like realized that I would get off during sexual experiences, but it was because like I could get myself there, not really because the partner that I was with was like getting me there. Like what they were doing wasn't really doing anything. It's like what I knew to like twist and turn with my body to get what I wanted. They were just a tool to get what I wanted, what I realized. And so I think, I am lucky and maybe privileged in that way, but that's also because like I really have gotten to know my body. So let's talk about the orgasm gap, okay? When asked, heterosexual men were more likely to say they usually always orgasmed when sexually intimate. That was about 95%. Followed by gay men at 89%, bisexual men 88%, lesbian women 86%, bisexual women 66%, and heterosexual 65%. A study in 2020 showed that women experience 20 to 49% fewer orgasms than men in heterosexual encounters, and also report enjoying sexual encounters less than their male counterparts just in general, not even talking about orgasming. In contrast, though, there is evidence that people in lesbian and gay relationships do experience orgasms at a higher frequency and have less of a orgasm gap. So why is this? Why are women experiencing orgasms at such a lower rate than men? It's theorized, it's just easier for men, it's harder for women. There's rhetoric like, it's just guys just happen more naturally, or a woman is more complex, or she's just not into sex as much as guys are, which just is totally bullshit. Everybody likes to experience pleasure, no matter their gender. And an orgasm is the height of pleasure. It is the explosion. It is the culmination of all of that pressure and tension. It's the fulfilling crescendo of the musical piece that is a sexual encounter. And no, you don't always have to. And sometimes it's fun to play around with that, which, with edging or with different dynamics, that may not always be the goal. But why is it not ever the goal for some people? Some factors that contribute to this: one are a lack of anatomical knowledge. Women really need clitoral stimulation in order to climax. This has been proven in studies. I'll link them below. It's much easier for a woman or someone with a vagina to reach climax when there's clitoral stimulation. Why is that? And that's because there's so much nerve endings there, just like in the tip of someone's penis, versus when you're inside the vagina, it can be harder to find that G-spot, and it's a lot less sensitive than using the clit. And so many women need that in order to stimulate them enough to reach climax, which makes sense. Now, I do think that it takes time and practice, and this is from experience, in order to find a way to climax with just penetration. I have, through like experimenting and just like figuring out my body, that I am able to do that. But that takes like time and patience, and also knowing your body. I think it's a tried and true saying that you have to know how to pleasure yourself in order for somebody else to be able to do it. Yes, men can do a better job at paying attention, and we're going to get into a lot of things like them needing to just understand where the clit is and how to stimulate it. But also knowing what you like, knowing what to ask for, knowing your boundaries are going to lead to such a much more successful sexual encounter. This article says, it wasn't until 1998 that detailed information about the anatomy and physiology of the female clitoral complex came to light. In the same vein, textbooks predominantly do not mention the clitoris, and school sex education widely lacks pleasure-oriented approaches. These social culture forces that restrict women's sexual pleasure by obscuring knowledge seem to have an impact on people's sexuality and knowledge up to this present day. Results from a study show that large knowledge gaps concerning the clitoris persist for both women and men. On average, participants answered only 50%, 4.5 out of 9, of quiz items correctly when given a quiz on anatomy. When people don't have an understanding of what it takes for someone with a clitoris and vagina to climax, then how are they going to be able to help somebody be able to do that? If you don't know where a clit is, if you don't know what acts stimulate it, when we're also talking about school, it is more of an abstinent focus. We're not talking about sex as it being pleasurable. And I think, there's this idea that if you make it sound not pleasurable or don't think about those things, and kids won't want to do it. Honey, kids are going to want to do it up and day all day long, okay? Doesn't matter whether you describe it as pleasurable or not. The only difference is that people may actually have more pleasurable experiences and be open to discovering and experimenting and finding how to get that pleasure. Now, it's not just a lack of knowledge that is contributing to the orgasm gap, and actually the lack of knowledge really goes hand in hand and is a result of heteronormativity, our patriarchal society, and gender labor. And like the article said, it's not just men, it's also women that aren't very knowledgeable about their own anatomy, which again I say is why you have to discover yourself. Have you ever looked at yourself in a mirror? I do. I'll just say, and it's good and it's fun, or it can be, it can be pure education, or it can be fun, and you can experiment and figure out how to turn yourself on with just yourself. I mean, it's a fun, practice, and also contributes to like self-love and self-worth and like being comfortable presenting yourself to other people in that way, because you are confident in what you have going on and you've accepted what you have. And what you're presenting. Anyways, but also I hear a lot from, my friends, it's just harder and it just takes longer. And, and that may be true, but that does not mean that you're not worthy of having it. And once again, a little experimentation, bringing toys, vibrators into this scenario to get that clitoral stimulation is going to help you take that to the next level. And once you get the hang of it, it can almost kind of be like a skill. I'm starting to sound like a porn star, but it is kind of a skill. And like once you learn like how to do it, you're going to get there. Right? So, but we also can't rely on the world to teach us things. There are some things we need to find out on our own. Now, we have this restricted and lack of knowledge because of this patriarchal society that we live in, wanting to shut down pleasure, wanting to make sex less accessible and make it more morally taboo in order to restrict our freedom. Restricting us from finding pleasure and connection and deepening relationships with people only helps, the powers that be control us more, keep us more in line with what they want, which, is a bit scary sometimes. this idea of being, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, these societal expectations only make it harder for us to be our true authentic selves and really connect in a transparent and intimate way in order to have those really intimate and safe moments. This is just something else I'm thinking of. I read in a lot of the articles that women tend to also have orgasms more within a committed relationship. And while I think that part of that is an emotional intimacy, and a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, she needs that. And to a degree, yes, that's true. But I also think that there is a sense of physical and mental and emotional safety that we find within committed relationships. This is like across the board as well. Most people find that they have more satisfactory sex and more orgasms when they're in a committed relationship. I think that is because we're able to find more safety, let our walls down, and not be so self-conscious either, and really just like let go and find the pleasure. But when we're all performing gender labor and heteronormative ideals, we can't let go. We can't be ourselves. We can't let our freak flag fly. But one article says, the work that men and women do to create a sex life that conforms to the dominant narratives of normal sexuality can be seen in terms of what Jane Woodward calls gender labor, the effort necessary for both heterosexual desirability and the gender binary to appear natural. This labor harnesses heteronormative beliefs about what counts as real sex, what kinds of sex are good and right, and what is dirty and suspect. So once again, these ideals have been ingrained into people about conflating sex with morality. And I think that's also why people aren't able to find pleasures in the way that they should, because they think that what they're doing is wrong. And that gets into a lot of like religion and shame stuff, and that's really a lot for a cult episode, and like deconstructing like that shame that is built in because you're never allowed to have sex, and then all of a sudden you get married and oh, now you can have all the sex in the world. How do you turn off that switch? I've read a lot, seen a lot of documentaries. It's a very common experience for men and women that were raised in really controlling religious environments and conservative religious environments. But basically, once again, it's a technique of control, and controlling how people express themselves and to keep them in line. And this idea of sex, what kind of sex is good and bad. There's a lot of people that see kink as being bad, or people that never have toys in the bedroom. I've known and dated men that were very opposed to toys in the bedroom. And at this point in my life, now it's a non-negotiable. But a younger me didn't really understand why someone would be intimidated by something that's just bringing more pleasure to me. Wouldn't it bring more pleasure to you to see me in more pleasure? But it's because of these patriarchal ideas that don't sanction anything besides just penis and vagina intercourse. Like, that's sex and that's it. The actual act of sex is only described as that act of a penis being inserted into a vagina, which is just, I think, incorrect, and once again restricts us from exploring and expanding our ideas to find more pleasure. It continues, penile vaginal intercourse is portrayed and understood as the main event in heterosexual encounters. Okay, this is what I was just saying. Okay. I could have just kept reading this. In this way, other sexual activities that place greater emphasis on clitoral stimulation, such as oral sex, are categorized as something other than regular sex, categorized as foreplay that happens before sex, or as a special treat that is considered optional. This sexual script places an expectation upon women to orgasm in a time frame oriented towards men's pleasure, which can lead to women to fake orgasms to protect the feelings of their partner, which I've definitely done before. Only a handful of times, which is just not worth it to do, because then you're like teaching someone the wrong lesson. That kind of recapped what I was saying, but then goes into the further point that, if we're not considering all of those other things sex, and we're only considering this one specific act when there's insertion, to be sex, then yes, women are going to have a harder time finding pleasure and reaching climax during that if there is no clitoral stimulation, there's no foreplay leading up to it, there's no switch around, and a man usually does happen to come faster than a woman more often than not, especially if those things that I talked about haven't happened. And so it does kind of almost bring a sense of shame when you can't do something in the same time frame as maybe the guy that's hooking up with you. But that's not like a bad thing. Like, it's not your fault. One, he came too quick, and two, the data is here. The clitoral stimulation needs to happen. If it's not happening, it's not gonna happen. You know what I mean? Unless you've worked your way to the top of the sexual experience, a pyramid, and know the ways, it's not gonna happen. So I also have this article. It's called "Climaxes Work: Heteronormativity, Gender Labor, and the Gender Gap in Orgasm." And they did a study just to kind of understand women and men's thought process and experiences when it comes to sexual pleasure, and to gab some data. So here are some of the findings. Participants' depictions reveal how both men and women are doing work to reproduce traditional gender norms in which women are expected to prioritize emotional, romantic intimacy, and men to prioritize physical sexual desire and pleasure. And we're doing, this gender labor to fit in these norms that are once again putting us in boxes, labeling us as supposed to be focused on this. And then when you're not focused on that, and maybe you do want to have sex, or you are a bit more promiscuous, then you're a whore. It's the whole Madonna whore dichotomy, plays right into it too, where women, the philosophy that men can see women as only, the mother figure and the nurturer, or a whore. And one is more and less deserving of certain things in different scenarios than the other. And us as women, we're falling into that trap of thinking that we're less deserving of having, positive sexual experiences and having orgasms than men, because it, quote, is, quote, harder. When it's not, it just takes a little bit of practice, maybe an exploration, and a break from the hetero norm. When it came to sex and morality, participants had to say, sexual behaviors such as watching pornography, giving or receiving oral sex, and using vibrators or sex toys were described as not only separate from regular sex, but also morally contentious. Kathy told us that she needs oral stimulation to orgasm, but said, quote, I don't do oral sex. It can be very pleasurable, but it feels wrong to me. It just doesn't feel natural. I feel like it's dirty sex, almost like watching porn. I'm not into porn, and I'm not into oral sex. It just makes me feel dirty, end quote. Makes her feel dirty. And that's sad, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. And unfortunately, that's the cause of being raised and indoctrinated into this patriarchal society that does not value women at all, does not value women's experiences, does not value anybody but a man's experience, a straight man's experience, most often a straight white man's experience, does not value anybody else's experience, and is therefore invaluable and not necessary. And in order to trick people into not wanting those things, you have to make them think that they're bad for wanting those things. You have to make them think that they are sinful or morally wrong or dirty for wanting to incorporate something that might lend more to them having a positive experience, that might take away some, I don't know, focus from the other person, from the man, that you want to take away these tools that would enable them and ultimately empower them. Because a woman that is free and that is fucking and that is orgasming is an empowered woman who knows the capabilities and the power of her body and her life. When asked to comment on why men orgasm more frequently, Carter said, Because I'm a guy. It's mandatory. That's almost a redundant question. Similarly, Kathy expressed that, quote, I have not known a man that has not had an orgasm with sex. I don't think a man would have sex if he thought he couldn't orgasm. Both men and women in our interviews characterized men's orgasm as natural and obvious. Jane also said, quote, I think men need to orgasm, but I don't feel like I need to orgasm, end quote. Jump scare. It's me the next day. I film on my iPad most of the time because it's the best camera quality that I have, and it died yesterday when I was recording this, so I wanted to hop back on here and finish reading that quote that I was reading, or the excerpt from the article that I was reading, and also just wrap up and finalize my conversations. But this is going to be short and sweet, and excuse how I look. I've been teaching 3-year-olds all day. I want to smoke and I want to go to bed. It's 11:10 p.m. Okay, but I just wanted to finish where I left off. So I don't need to recap for you what we were talking about. There's only been a time gap for me. This was just 10 seconds ago for you. Okay, anyways. Ashley agreed, quote, for most men, having an orgasm is the main goal. For women, they just want it to be a good time and feel appreciated and not be painful. And women, well, most women are a lot less hung up on the actual orgasm in my experience. Now, this is true. And like I've said before, the end goal does not always have to be an orgasm, but it also shouldn't be something that's put on the back burner because you, quote, don't care about it as much. Do you really not care about it, or have you just never really experienced a real orgasm to know what you're missing out on? I fear that may be a case for a lot of people, and there's, once again, no shame. It's just deconstructing, why do you really think that way? And I think it's really sad because I know a lot of women that think this way. I know a lot of people with sexual trauma, and the idea of just not wanting it to be painful is really disheartening. Like, why is the bar in hell for our experience having sex, which is supposed to be the ultimate pleasure of what we can experience as humans in this realm and plane in time? And if you find yourself saying that having an orgasm isn't important to you, or it's just too hard, stop and really settle and think about what you said and deconstruct what caused you to have that belief system about yourself and about your sexual pleasure. Why do you think you are less worthy of having an orgasm than maybe your partner? Why do you think that the maybe more time that it takes to get you to climax is a waste of time compared to the time spent getting your partner to climax? And also, I think ultimately, going back to my original point where, I talked to people about being abstinent for so long, and this is the thing. If I wanted to fuck somebody, where's my phone? Where's my phone? Face unlock. A beep boop boop beep beep bop boop. Alert, 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 alert. I got somebody I can fuck. Are you joking? Anybody, anywhere in the world, if you want to fuck someone, you can. And I'm the type of person that I'm able to really separate sex and emotions. That level of just fun sexual intimacy can be very separate from an emotional intimacy. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that I have to shut off a part of myself and able to have that separation, and it then trickles down into other relationships. When I want to finally break that wall and not let those be so compartmentalized in my emotions and in my head, it's really hard and leads me to just not taking things seriously, and ultimately has led me to put myself in many compromising and unsafe positions, which I just didn't need to do. And now that I no longer want to have those two things separated, and I've realized that it is a bit of a disassociation almost to just that level of it, of just like mentally and emotionally separating the active sex from like an emotional connection and an emotional intimacy. Now that I've decided that I don't want to be in a place where those two things are separate, I've realized that okay, well, now that they're meshed together, those bitches are glued. Those bitches are glued, and you can't, like, I can't really now have one without having the other, which has brought me to this place, and which is fine. Doesn't mean I'm not dating, doesn't mean I'm not interested, doesn't mean I'm not open. I'm just very, very selective about where my energy is going and what energy I'm allowing into my orbit. There's Celine. Celine, do you have stuff to say about this? Is this Do you experience this with your boyfriend Tony? Celine doesn't have a boyfriend. His name is Tony. He comes and visits her and sits outside my door. Okay, go away, please. So now that I know why I'm doing it, what I'm doing it for, how I want to get it, and how I want it to feel, it makes it a lot easier to be comfortable not being in a position of like, oh yeah, I'm like fucking guys all the time. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of people have sexual encounters and sexual relationships not even out of just wanting the pure pleasure of it, which I'm not going to knock anybody. I'm not knocking anybody's lifestyle. I'm just saying, you know, if you're not orgasming, then what are you doing it for? And that's fine. Just know why. Because then are you just doing it because you want skin to skin contact? Are you just doing it because you want to feel held? Are you just doing it because you want to feel appreciated? Are you just wanting to do it because you feel like it gives you self-worth? Okay, well, we need to work on that and we need to analyze. We need to reel that back. We need to deconstruct and find out why we got to that belief system, because you could just cuddle someone. You can give someone a hug. You can give someone a kiss. There are so many other ways to find tension and pleasure and emotional intimacy with someone than just like actual insertion. Do you know what I mean? Are you guys, you know, do you people think that I'm crazy because I'm abstaining until like I really feel like find someone that I actually like and like actually feel comfortable with? Do they have to be the love of my life? No, but like I have to like you, and I don't really like a lot of people, to be honest. And I'm very comfortable in my body. I'm very comfortable in my sexuality, which is something also that, you know, I am very privileged to be in a body that I am comfortable in and that I resonate with, and to be like really secure in my sexuality and secure in what I find brings me pleasure. And I'm also comfortable being by myself because I'm still going to be able to find that pleasure and find that worship like within myself. And oftentimes that's more rewarding than just like, you know, 30 seconds of like feeling cool, 30 seconds of like feeling seen. You know, when you're really not being seen, because are you really being seen if you're not being pleasured? Ask yourself that question. Wow, I've been talking for 10 more minutes. This is going to be one of my longest episodes. I'm so sorry. I guess I had a lot of fucking shit to say. I'm sure I still have more to say in my head. But now that I've talked about all of this, here are my like next steps for you if you resonated with any of this. My next steps would be to do a lot more self-pleasure and self-exploration, finding different toys, starting with vibrators, clitoral stimulators, any of the roses or like air pulse thingies are going to be good. I'm going to leak I'm going to link in the Babblings report my favorite online sex stores. You know, Adam and Eve, you can always find a code for them, or you can always find an influencer that has a code for like 50% off and free shipping. Bella Cia is always running a deal. And then I would say once you've figured and harnessed that out, then you're going to want to move to the next level of maybe getting something that is for like G-spot stimulation to be inserted and see where you can pleasure yourself that way. You also are going to want to find like ethical sexual imagery and videos, pornography. I say ethical because a lot of it is not ethically made. But sometimes I do think like a visual really is stimulating for people. I also really love audio porn or audio steamy audios or smutty audios. I don't really know what it's called. I use Quinn, but that's another way to find stimulation through like audio. If you're like me and you're someone who really needs like a mental stimulation, so like talking, thinking, sensing, using those kinds of like audio and visual stimulants like will help. And once you kind of get an idea using those to like understand what you like, then I would say put them away, because you don't want to become reliant on those things, and you don't want to like completely form your view of sex through those stimulants, especially pornography. I think it is, I mean, this we couldn't even get into pornography in this episode. That would be a whole other episode. And the way that access to pornography has completely shaped multiple generations' brains and the way that they view sex, and the way that they view sex as a very aggressive act, and the way that women are portrayed as being able to come easily when usually they aren't, and come off of extremely violent ways. And not in a kinky way, right? Like there is a kink side of that world, and oftentimes kink doesn't really even lead to orgasm. I think that's a whole other subset of things, and finding pleasure and exploring and seeing what stimulates you. But yeah, like you want to set those aside because you don't want it to completely shape your worldview. But once you kind of have an idea, you can start exploring different scenarios in your head and picturing different things in your mind that might feel stimulating to you. If you are interested in like self-love magic and sex magic, we could definitely do an episode about that. And that kind of goes back to doing things in the mirror, doing things with intention, doing things as ritual. But that's a whole other subset. But let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in, because I would love to talk about that. Ultimately, I think that being able to honestly like have the orgasms that I do by myself has liberated me as a person, because I'm like not desperate for a man or a partner, or a sexual encounter in any kind of way. And when you're not in a place of desperation, usually good things can come. Because when you are in a place of desperation, you usually end up in situations that you wouldn't normally, that wouldn't actually make you feel comfortable, and that most likely really like aren't serving you. Reminder to always have safe sex, get yourself tested, use condoms, and like insert your boundaries and stop faking for these men. We have got to stop faking orgasms. It's an epidemic. It's a problem. Okay. God bless. Love you. Good night.